Trump is very unhappy with NATO, and I think NATO should start getting seriously worried about it. Two more Iranian leaders have been located and eliminated, according to Israel. One of them is the person who commanded the shooting of 35,000 protesters just recently in Iran. That's exactly where both of them belong. Military personnel are refusing to follow orders, and such situations are becoming more and more common. Today, one of the Iranian army generals has sided with the people.
18 days on the nth day of the most significant military campaign since World War II, the Islamic Republic of Iran is starting to crack from within. His generals have disappeared, salaries are not being paid, and soldiers are refusing to follow orders. And tonight we receive news of something that could end this war faster than anyone could have imagined. Desertion at the highest levels of power. The regime is in a state of complete large-scale collapse. And only one thing can save them.
Today, Al Jazeera, not exactly a pro-American or pro-Israeli outlet, published an analysis. Is the strategy of the U.S. and Israel working in Iran? Of course, you could say that after Qatar signed investment deals with the U.S., they toned down their fierce barking to a more moderate one. But they are clearly not pro-Israel.
Что они пишут?
Today, in one of my previous videos, I emphasized the extraordinary admission made by Al Jazeera itself, the Qatari TV company funded by Qatar, which shamelessly supports Iran and political Islam. It has a very anti-Israel, anti-American track record, and even they admit that this war is being decisively won by American and Israeli forces. Remember, the key calculation here is that we are getting stronger and they are getting weaker, right? With every hour, they are getting weaker. With every hour, we are getting stronger, which means we can hit them even more ruthlessly. So this is a worsening asymmetry. The weaker the regime's forces become as a result of our relentless bombing campaign, the more ruthlessly the U.S. and Israeli forces can act. So, as we discussed earlier, the leadership structure of this regime has been completely and absolutely decapitated. We're talking about figures such as the Supreme Leader, the Commander of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the Minister of Defense, the Chief of the General Staff, the head of the IRGC Aerospace Forces, the Senior Security Advisor, as well as the heads of the Iranian Organization for Nuclear Weapons Research. The IDF also confirmed the elimination of 15 high-ranking leaders of the Axis of Resistance for the first time. The days of this war, including the leaders of Hezbollah and commanders of Hamas, effectively destroying the entire regional command structure that Tehran had been building for 4 decades. By today, the 18th day, U.S. and Israeli forces have struck more than 5,500 targets on Iranian territory, leaving Khamenei's untested son, Mojtaba, as the nominal successor. According to reports, he is in a bunker and may be wounded, possibly even in a coma. He believed it. Ironically, he is now leading a headless, decentralized IRGC operating on autopilot rather than through strategic management.
The resistance seems to be happening as scattered actions by individual IRGC units, and it's still unclear whether the army, or as it's called locally, Artesh, is taking part in this.
A picture emerges of the Islamic Republic under intense internal pressure, with low wages, demoralized and increasingly fragmented, divided between competing centers of power fighting over a shrinking pool of resources. Even as American and Israeli bombs continue to fall. Now we're being told that there really is a pro-American faction within the top command of the IRGC. There are reports of a pro-Western IRGC general already connected with the CIA and Mossad who could step up and lead an internal revolution at the moment of maximum IRGC weakness. Introducing Darren Kempel, former deputy commander of Israel's Sayeret Matkal and CEO of Bond International.
This revolutionary strategy would mean, first of all, that we must ensure the destruction of all military infrastructure. All this time, we are preparing a friendly general who is probably already connected with Mossad or the CIA. And at the right moment, when we destroy the military infrastructure, and when we feel that the IRGC is sufficiently weakened, this general will essentially step forward and lead the uprising. I don't have any insider information. I don't know how close we are to this step, but it's likely. Probably a matter of a few weeks.
It seems like it's a matter of a few weeks. We need to do this by the end of March. or at the very latest, at the very beginning of April, so that the patience of American voters doesn't run out. So we don't have a few weeks, gentlemen. We have, well, 3 weeks.
The Islamic Republic didn't just create an army, it actually built a doomsday architecture. At the core of this architecture are 10 regional IRGC headquarters, each commanding local brigades, battalions, and besieged units with almost complete autonomy. The intention was clear. If Tehran's command structure is destroyed, if they are decapitated, the regime doesn't freeze. It fragments and keeps fighting. Each element continues to fire, suppress, and restore order without waiting for instructions from the center. So, this is the doctrine known as mosaic defense, and here is its key idea. The fact that it is being activated right now is not a sign of strength at all. This is evidence that the regime has entered the very phase of collapse that it was preparing itself for. Therefore, when Iran is still launching missiles after losing so many of its high-ranking commanders, analysts say that these launches do not prove strategic coordination. In fact, they prove that this system was created to outlast its commanders. The doomsday system operates on autopilot, doesn't it? That's not flexibility. It's a dead-hand system that does what it was programmed to do. This is essentially the death throes. For example, when the Iranian foreign minister was asked over the weekend why on earth Iran attacked Qatar or Oman, which are basically its allies, but he admitted that he had no valid reason. There was no coherent explanation, and there couldn't be one because this was the result of a complete collapse of the system. This is one of the reasons why prominent opposition figures like Reza Pahlavi have directly told the Iranian people to stay home, stock up on essentials, continue nightly chants, and wait for the decisive moment.
By the way, here is the opinion of Victor Davis Hanson, which, well, I don't know, matches mine 100%.
We are in the second week of the so-called Iranian war. This is a very surreal war. I don't think any of us have seen anything like this. It's only been 2 weeks, and we're being told that this is dragging on, that it's an endless war, that we're losing, that the Pentagon and the Trump administration had no plans. And yet, if you look at Iran, this huge country, much bigger, much more populated than Iraq or Afghanistan, it no longer has an army.
Yes, before I forget, at the end I promise a terribly interesting story. Very interesting. Our press, our Democratic Party, our liberals have entered such a state of hatred toward Trump that, just to prevent his plans from succeeding, they're willing to sacrifice our guys on the front lines, our national interests. Once again, what are we doing there? The thing is, we, as they say, went in there. We are looking at a regime that finances terrorism all over the world, which in my opinion immediately affects the national interests of the United States of America, which declares that it will use all its power as soon as it has it to destroy us. Well, maybe they can't do it today, but maybe they will be able to tomorrow. That's why, in my opinion, this is also a matter of America's national interests. The regime has one goal, which they openly state. Maybe in reality it's not exactly like that, but that's what they say. And generally we believe them, to cleanse the land of infidels. Again, that means us. Just like Lenin, Trotsky, Stalin, Sverdlov, and other filthy socialist creatures wanted to turn us all into slaves. By the way, I honestly don't see any difference between praying to Muhammad or to Lenin, and to believe that today's inhabitant of the high tower is a representative of God on earth. Absolutely immaculate. Well, until he dies, and the next one comes and accuses him, covering him with filth and slander for all his sins. Well, once again then, accordingly, our friend Hanson. I really love his definitions. They're always very precise.
We're in the second week, just finishing it up. The so-called Iranian war, this attempt by the United States to bomb the theocracy into submission, to make them abandon their missile and nuclear programs, as well as to lead the popular protest in the streets, which has the potential to overthrow the regime itself. But this is a very surreal war. I don't think any of us have seen anything like it. Its supplies of missile drones to the Gulf countries and Israel have decreased by 90%. So what's going on? And I think part of the problem is that there's no media coverage. There are no embedded reporters there because we're not on the ground. When there are no ground combat operations on enemy territory, you don't have American embedded journalists traveling with the troops who can provide diverse opinions and accurate reports. All we have are journalists who are allowed into Iran. And guess who that is? CNN. And they report the party line coming from the Iranian theocracy.
Yes, yes, and yes. CNN reports the party line, and this line meaning the information, where does it come from? Why, from the camel. Of course, from the camel. From the propaganda department of the Iranian theocratic regime, which through our press, meaning the Democratic Party of the United States of America, is trying to fight. Fight against whom? Fight against America. That is the Democratic Party of the USA and its department. The propaganda press is, by the classical definition, a fifth column. Franco once defined it, everyone liked it, and now it's used everywhere. If anyone doesn't know, the fifth column is a group inside the country that, in the interests of the enemy, an external enemy, undermines the state from within, engages in espionage, sabotage, propaganda, and prepares uprisings. Simply put, they're traitors. What is there to say?
Предатели.
There's no continuation of that anymore. Even in the first Gulf War of 1990 to 91, people were united. The Democratic Party is not the Democratic Party of Bill Clinton. It's a socialist one, let's put it that way. That's a euphemism. It doesn't really believe in traditional America and thinks that if it can create the impression that America is losing, then two things will follow. For some, this means that the November midterms are democratic, and so it's in their own interest to exaggerate this fiasco, so to speak, or tragedy, or the fact that we're losing. And there are others who are actually in the Democratic Party, and I'm talking about the squad, or they actually sympathize with the enemy. If you think I'm crazy, there was a protest in New York where there were foreign residents, students on student visas, and naturalized citizens. And what about them? What are they doing? They were shouting, "Shame on the United States. Why are we fighting?" And who were they protesting in defense of? Iran, Hezbollah terrorists, and Hamas terrorists.
Gentlemen, your subscription and the bell are your way of thanking our team. This is the result of a chaotic immigration policy, an idiotic voting system, and allowing those who have contributed nothing to the country to dictate their terms to those who themselves, or whose ancestors for many generations, built this country and fought for it, and who understand the basic principles of society outside of any organization. Personally, I can't figure out how an immigrant who came from Kenya, Bangladesh, Morocco, or Belarus can understand and feel the principle of the American Revolution, the principle of American individualism, the free market, non-interference, as reflected in the Declaration of Independence and in Thomas Paine's Common Sense. By the way, I'm afraid that even today's universities and their graduates, not just high school graduates, have no idea about this, what makes America different from the rest of the world, and why life became so much easier for people in America, even though 200 years ago there was nothing here but forests, fields, and rivers, and those so-called barbarians, the so-called primitive Indians, were running around, no matter how they're portrayed in movies, yes, with tomahawks and axes, fighting each other, taking each other's scalps, and being quite happy about it. There was nothing. And then suddenly there was everything people in Europe and Asia could only dream of. They don't understand why. And if someone had told them, they would have been surprised and, well, I think they wouldn't have believed it. But it turned out to be simple. For the first time in human history, people, just ordinary people, could do anything they wanted, sell to anyone they wanted, and keep the profits for themselves. That is, they now had motivation. You work hard, you put in the effort, you get rewarded. If you don't, you get nothing. And that's how it was in America until 1912. And then socialists started to arrive, along with their freeloaders, thieves, in other words, communists, bandits. I don't know, it's all the same. A communist is a bandit, it's the same thing. Why do I say that? Communists believe they can decide how much to take from someone else's work, sometimes everything, sometimes part, whenever they want. Bandits act the same way, right? You're riding in a carriage and they take things from you, or they come to your house with sticks or guns and take what they want. Whenever they want, they take it. There were more and more of them. And in 100 years, we went from deciding that it's okay to rob people to Obama, just like that. God forbid his name gets mentioned one more time, as they say. The party today is not just against Trump to the point of bitterness and losing their minds. It's also anti-Semitic. And to avoid being labeled, they say, "We're not anti-Semites." No, what are you talking about? I have a Jewish friend. I treat him well. We even drink vodka, beer, or something else together, right?
Мы антисемиты.
We're anti-Zionists, not against Jews, but against Jews who want to live in Israel. What?
This is an extremely unusual situation. And on top of everything else, we are witnessing an element of anti-Semitism, where right now the Democratic Party, its electorate, its base, is simply openly anti-Semitic. And I'll just make one random observation. I predict that you won't see any presidential or vice presidential candidates from among American Jews in the foreseeable future. It will be almost impossible to nominate anyone of Jewish descent at the national level from the Democratic Party. And you can see this by watching how the Democrats are reacting to this war. They wholeheartedly believed in the idea that Benjamin Netanyahu is pulling the strings of the Donald Trump puppet, and that tiny Israel is being dragged into this war. Even though all 7 previous presidents before Trump officially stated that Iran would not get nuclear weapons during their time in office, and that they would take measures to prevent this and not allow it in the future. None of them did that.
Unfortunately, these same sentiments have penetrated the extremely populist so-called MAGA wing. Tucker Carlson, who leaked secret information to Iran. Candace, who constantly pours any kind of abuse on Jews that comes to her mind. And now Megyn Kelly, who, sensing that there is a huge audience there, and it's not just an audience, it's fame and money as her father is leaving. Yes, she nods and agrees with Tucker with a knowing look that not everything is right with the Jews. Oh, not everything. But enough about the anti-Semites. They don't deserve that much credit. Let's get back to Iran, which also doesn't deserve that much honor. Trump is preparing an invasion.
Karg Island is this small, tiny piece of coral, and yes, it's also a multiplayer map in Battlefield 3 for those who remember such things, but if you're not a fan of video games, there's a lot of oil infrastructure on the southern part of the island. In the northern part of the island, you have a small airstrip. Let me clarify. You had a small airstrip. And then, of course, a few SAM batteries and some temporary housing for the workers who came for shifts and didn't want to travel 15 nautical miles back and forth, or, sorry, 15 regular miles. If you zoom out, it's right here at the northern tip, just below Iran of the Persian Gulf. And it's quite a distance from the Strait of Hormuz, but this is exactly the place where Iran carries out most, or as the Spanish say, mucho, of its oil exports. Here's something else for you. The central map. The United States Command has released dramatic footage of the defensive structures on Karg Island, which, let's be honest, no one really thought would stand up to a serious test. In fact, even a kitten could probably knock it over. But CENTCOM, with what looks like long-range salvos, probably from US Navy ships, maybe a couple of bombers, although they don't quite fit the typical strike profile. Probably Tomahawk launches. You can see the last Iranian planes on the runway being hit, as well as a few SAM systems. These are extremely precise strikes. This is considered one of the most thorough and cautious military operations when it comes to selecting specific targets. The number of civilian casualties on the enemy side in this conflict, considering the scale, was almost record low. We have never seen this level of surgical precision. But the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, or more precisely, a source inside who claims to be a member and whose affiliation with the IRGC was confirmed by Reuters, stated, quote, They firmly believe that if Iran loses control over the Strait of Hormuz, it will effectively lose the war.
So they haven't lost the war. I would put it this way. They will have no money, no hope, no opportunities, but they can die with honor and dignity, which, by the way, is what I wish for them. For most of them, at least. His central command is not destroyed and is not functioning. The so-called regional centers themselves continue to resist, but there is no one to fight anywhere. There isn't a single Israeli or American. That is, you can shoot into the air, and maybe at that moment something will fly by and you'll hit it. Or at ships in the Hormuz Strait. And if that opportunity disappears, then how and with whom will they fight? Just so that they all get killed, or what?
Sorry, the United Arab Emirates doesn't have a particularly powerful army, and they gave Iran a bit more freedom, trying to say, we're not interfering, we're not interfering. Probably for this reason. Here you can see footage of smoke coming from one of the key oil refineries in Al Fujairah in the United Arab Emirates. This is footage from today. Iran is trying to strike at other Middle Eastern countries that no longer want to use the Hormuz Strait in the Persian Gulf. They don't want to use it because the US will open it one way or another. And by the way, if you're interested, after the US takes control of Karg Island, they will essentially control all the oil in the Persian Gulf. And if you're interested in why, well, I'll give you the economic reason. The price of crude oil will drop to about $60 per barrel pretty quickly.
Well, that is, if Tony Kinnard is right, and he has serious connections both in the White House and in the Pentagon, then the U.S. is going to lower the price of oil to $60 per barrel. Light oil, I mean, and keep this price, well, constant for the foreseeable future. At the same time, they plan to stop unauthorized sales like those from Venezuela and Iran, which were going to China, right? Well, Tony, from your lips.
There are a couple more things about that. Trump asked some countries to which Iran also supplies oil, as well as other states that purchase it through secondary or tertiary sources or benefit from trade in the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz, to join and consider the possibility of unblocking the Strait of Hormuz. But Germany, the United Kingdom, France, and obviously Spain immediately spoke out and said, no thank you. No, we will not send warships to the Middle East. We are not sending anyone to the Strait of Hormuz. China's response turned out to be a bit more interesting. Italy said nothing. Absolutely nothing. In fact, Prime Minister Meloni didn't say anything at all. Deputy Prime Minister Matteo Salvini stated that sending ships would mean entering the war, and Italy is trying to remain neutral, which has its own historical irony. The Spanish Defense Minister Margarita, I'm not joking, that's her name, Margarita Robles said, absolutely not. Honestly, I don't think anyone was really counting on Spain. So basically, China stated that it would not help the United States in opening the Strait of Hormuz, but it also wasn't going to do anything to interfere or stop it. Again, these are middle fingers that China and Russia are showing to Iran from afar, showing where they stand with you, but basically waving to Iran as it goes underwater. Of course, I'm talking about Iran's third fleet going underwater. Yes, India responded positively and sent several ships.
Europe is scared. China and Russia don't want a confrontation with the U.S. and wave to Iran from afar. And India, which previously seemed to be getting closer to BRICS and the global south, announced that its ships are already heading to the Gulf to help America restore order. So has India finally decided that it knows who is winning? Who is it, I wonder?
So, Steve Witkoff reportedly re-entered diplomatic negotiations with the Iranian foreign minister, but it was cut off yesterday after the whole country started laughing. There was news that the new supreme leader of Iran, Mojtaba Khamenei, whom no one has seen yet, and at first we didn't know why exactly, but Ayatollah Ali Khamenei didn't want his son to succeed him in power, stating in his will that maybe he wasn't competent enough. Well, now we know the real reason. He's gay. Because Mojtaba Khamenei, according to many White House intelligence sources, is quite a homosexual individual. And it turns out that when you're the most flamboyant supreme leader of the loom, when you'd rather hang from a crane than operate it like they do in Iran, yeah, I don't think that's gonna end well. There are now high expectations that one of the foreign ministers, or perhaps the second most important person in the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, who was also wounded, might take over the leadership. But this, I have to tell you, there's no way that they're really caught between a rock and a hard place. They just have nowhere to go. I doubt they'll really be able to consolidate anything. Again, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps held a gun to the Assembly of Experts and forced them to appoint or pseudo-elect someone in an Anschluss-style move. The next supreme leader of Iran is Mojtaba Khamenei, who, unlike, many in their regime, instead of screwing goats, I guess he's more into men, to each their own. So, we're moving on to Cuba, because right now things are very, very tough in the Cuban communist regime. Things are really, really rough.
As I expected, the story that the new Ayatollah is gay really hit the faithful Shia Muslims hard. Can you even imagine that? They used to throw gays off high-rise buildings, and now their leader, chosen by the Great Council of Elders, turned out to be homosexual, and they know that the whole world is laughing at them. This is actually a terrible blow to their pride, their self-esteem, and, by the way, to their religion as well. This means that the old man Ayatollah, and most importantly the Ayatollah himself, knew. And he didn't excommunicate him. This means that in the very heart of Shia Islam, of Islamism, there's a wormhole the size of a grand piano.
For 48 years, they have been bad players, malicious players, and they must not be allowed to obtain nuclear weapons. If they got nuclear weapons, I would say they would use them within 24 hours of obtaining them. And they would have gotten it if we hadn't bombed them during that great B-2 bomber raid about 8 months ago. There would have been a nuclear war in the Middle East and possibly beyond. I think it would have affected Europe, maybe not Ireland, but Europe would have been affected. I think you would have been hit too. It would have affected everyone. It's so massive that it would have affected you too. In the end, they would have struck Europe.
This is Trump in the White House at negotiations with the Prime Minister of Ireland.
It's good that he's no longer in office because he claimed that Iran was not a threat. Iran was a threat. Every country realized what a threat Iran was. The question was whether they wanted to do something about it. And many people, many top military experts have been saying for years that the president should have struck Iran because they wanted nuclear weapons. If we hadn't struck, or if, I'll go even further. If I hadn't withdrawn from the Iran nuclear deal that was forced on us, one of Barack Hussein Obama's worst deals, remember how they sent Boeing 757s there, packed with hundreds of millions of dollars in cash? You would have been very pleased. It was something incredible. They sent hundreds of millions of dollars. People forget about that. Does anyone remember? Exactly, you remember that. Hundreds of millions of dollars on Boeing 757s. I think they had 2 of them loaded. They took out the seats and loaded them with cash. It was so much that there wasn't any money left in any bank in Virginia, Maryland, or the District of Columbia. They took all their funds, placed them, and then sent them to Iran almost like a ransom. That definitely won't happen with Trump. And nobody did anything. Nobody said anything about it. Can you imagine if I did something like that? So they've been a threat for a long time, but now they've really become a threat. If I hadn't terminated Obama's terrible deal, the Iran nuclear deal he made, you would have had a nuclear war 4 years ago. You would have had a nuclear holocaust, and it would have happened again if we hadn't bombed that facility. So if someone works with us and claims that they didn't consider Iran a threat, then we don't need people like that, because there are probably people who would say that. But those are not smart people, or they are not perceptive people. Iran posed a huge threat. And practically every NATO country. And here's what's important. If they told me that it's not a threat, and that's why they don't want to help. But when they say it was a threat, and it was a serious threat, every one of them, I don't know a single one who would say it wasn't a threat. But when they say it was a threat and we're not going to help, I think they're very foolish. It's interesting. Это интересно.
And then, after journalists asked about Ukraine, about why the U.S. helps Israel, fights in Iran, but doesn't help Ukraine the way Ukraine is asking, here's what Trump answered.
What's happening in Ukraine? We've probably already invested $400 billion there. We're not spending any more money. They're buying it from us and paying full price. But Biden gave them between $350 and $400 billion in equipment and cash. Sooner or later, they'll have to find out about this money. And you could say it's not even a threat. You understand perfectly well we're helping them. We gave them support, but they didn't reciprocate, and I think that's very bad for NATO.
We helped Europe, said Trump. Even though it had nothing to do with us, we spent a hell of a lot of money on someone else's mess. He mentioned some numbers there. I don't know, he sometimes likes to exaggerate, but I don't know. 250, 300, 350 billion, it doesn't matter. A hell of a lot of money. Taking it away from our own people, who need it too? Money doesn't just lie around anywhere, right? It was taken from someone. That is, it wasn't used for something it could have been used for. To pay off debt, to build homes for the elderly, I don't know what. But we did it to help our partners. NATO partners, I mean in Europe. And when we needed help, what did our partners say? They said it wasn't their business. And that's when Trump took it very badly. He said that it wouldn't have a good effect on our relationship and, most importantly, on the fate of NATO.
I'm disappointed in NATO that we're spending trillions of dollars on it. Think about it, trillions over the years, many trillions of dollars. That's one of the reasons for our deficits while we're helping other countries. And when they don't help us, that's definitely something we should think about. I don't need Congress for that decision. As you probably know, I can make that decision myself. I would work with very smart people. And I would still always deal with Congress. Congress is needed for that decision. But when you say reconsider, it's not that I don't have anything on my mind right now, but I'll say that I'm not thrilled when we're helping them with Ukraine. Listen, if we hadn't helped, Ukraine would have been finished in one day. Honestly, it would have ended on the first day. They had the world's best equipment. It was our equipment given by Sleepy Joe Biden. No payment, no payment. Hundreds of billions of dollars of the best equipment in the world and no payment. I have to say, I'm not thrilled about this. I'm not happy about it.
If I were in the place of our NATO partners, I would be seriously concerned.
A military operation in Iran, in my opinion, is something that would basically be over in 2 or 3 days because the fleet would be destroyed almost instantly. The Air Force would be next. The air defense would be next. We fly over Iran. We could disable their power supply in 1 hour. They can't do anything right now because everything is out of order. They don't have, again, any radars, air defense. They have nothing. And that was a decision I made personally. We discussed it, Pete, Marco, JD, all of us, and Chris. We discussed it. We could cut off their electricity in a matter of minutes if we wanted to. They wouldn't be able to do anything about it. We could block their oil on Karg Island. The only thing we didn't touch was their oil, because if we block, I call them pipes, it's very complicated. But if you do that, it will take them forever to recover. That is, whoever it is, and I hope it will be a reasonable group of people, but whoever manages it, and we will try to find people who will manage it well. And it will be a prosperous, truly wonderful place. It used to be different. If you remember, there were wonderful, smart, and energetic people there, and it was very successful. Now it's a country ruled by fear. It's a country where protesters are told, don't go out into the streets because if you do, we'll kill you. Go out into the streets because if you do, we'll kill you.
War. The military goals and objectives were mostly achieved on the second day of the war, said Trump. Absolutely. Now there is a cleanup operation going on, but it is being done very carefully so as not to harm the future development of the Iranian state, but in order not to damage the infrastructure, without which Iran would not be able to exist. And we want to see a successful, prosperous Iran like it was before the arrival of the Islamic Iranian fanatics, zealots whom our Democratic Party has come to love so much, and in general, the Democrats who used to fight for the rights of women and minorities, against religious dominance, against dogmatism in schools and universities, against racism and sexism. With a wave of a magic wand, they suddenly became ideological allies of the Ayatollahs, specifically the Shiite ones. And if fighting against women's sports is considered democratic, then that's what they do. They support gender reassignment surgeries for children without informing their parents. They support racism as long as it's in favor of black people. And also for orange, brown, green, or anyone who's not white, God forbid. They support hiring and admissions based on anything except achievements, knowledge, or skills. Themis would take off her blindfold before delivering a verdict and think about who she was judging and how this aligns with the ideology of their party, movement, or group. And now let's get to the surprise I promised at the beginning of this show. Right at the start, well, almost at the very start, I've told you a lot about the Save America Act, which Trump has already pushed through Congress and is now trying to get through the Senate. The act, well, what is it? It's a voting law. There are some other points in it, but really it's mainly a voting law, and it's very simple. To participate in voting, you have to come with an ID and show it. That's how it's always been. That's how it is everywhere in the world, in all countries, right? That's what the people of the country want. 83% of the population of the United States wants it to be this way, so who doesn't want it? They don't want it. Only the elected Democrats in the Senate and Congress don't want it. And they resist as if their lives depend on it.
Right now, something extraordinary is happening in the United States Senate. And if you've ever wondered whether the American people can still make Washington do the right thing, what you're about to hear will give you a strong reason to believe the answer is yes. The Save America Act, the most sensible election integrity bill in a generation, supported by more than 83% of Americans, including a majority of Democrats, has finally gotten its moment. And to their credit, the Republican Party is not backing down. In fact, they're going on the offensive, unprecedented. In this chamber for more than 60 years, using every procedural weapon at their disposal, working late into the night, and holding the Democrats' feet to the fire every day on national television to explain why they're against the bill. This is a bill that is supported by the overwhelming majority of their own voters. The dynamics are real, the pressure is building, and it is the American people who are the driving force behind this process. And by the end of this video, you will see how many paths lead to victory. Because the patriots in Congress have a backup plan and then another backup plan for the backup plan. And they are determined to put this bill on President Trump's desk one way or another. So today is an important day. The Save America Act, the act to secure the voting rights of Americans. Finally, this week, the long-awaited debates will take place in the Senate after Senate Majority Leader John Thune initiated a procedural vote to begin discussing the significant electoral reform that was passed by the House of Representatives with 218 votes to 213 back in February. So remember, the SAVE Act is very simple and it's as fundamental as it can possibly be for a constitutional republic. It will require documentary proof of citizenship for voter registration and a government-issued photo ID to vote in all federal elections. That's it.
Democrats are fighting this so hard that it's clear their lives depend on being able to cheat in elections, and the Democrats have enough votes to block this law, since the Republicans don't have 60 senators, which means they don't have 60% of the votes and you need 60. But there is a way out, says Senator Mike Lee from Utah.
I urge everyone who hears me and who wants this bill to become law to reach out to as many people as possible. Friends, neighbors, especially United States senators who may listen to you. Ask them please to pass it. Tell them that we need to implement a talking filibuster in the United States Senate. No zombie filibuster will help here. We have to take up this bill, debate it, and not back down from it until it becomes law. Give up. Can't. There can't be any
If and or but, there can't be any cheap imitations here. The Republic is under threat. Let's do this. So, what Mike Lee is proposing is a hybrid version of the so-called talking filibuster, and we already discussed this yesterday. A hybrid approach means that the bill goes to the Senate for consideration and then extended debates are announced even before a motion to end the debate is filed. This way, the Democrats will have no choice but to be publicly under fire, forcing them to back down. How do you explain your disagreement with a bill that 80% of Americans support, including the majority of Democrats, and they'll have to publicly state that disagreement day after day under the cameras right before the midterm elections? This is called a Republican takeover of the Senate floor. They flood the chamber with lengthy sessions, late nights, and relentless pressure in debates in a calculated attempt to force Democrats to publicly justify their opposition to a bill that's only about saving America.
I really want you to understand that democracy means very complex decision-making procedures. All of this was originally designed to prevent rash, heavy-handed mistakes from being made, like those made by commissars. By the way, the voting system is also designed in this way, but naturally this makes any decisions much more complicated and slower. But not only the ones you want, but also the ones you really wouldn't want. They slow down and complicate any decisions.
Решения и изменения.
The Republicans are doing the following right now. They are forcing the Democrats to publicly explain why they are against a law that 83% of the country wants. What's the problem? Why are they standing their ground so firmly? What is it that they don't want to allow? Honesty? And as soon as they lay out their arguments, a Republican will take the podium right after and explain why that's not true, over and over again. Are you trying to deceive me? That's the only thing you want. That's what you do. Harm to America, right? To keep your cozy positions. Has there been a precedent for this? Yes, there has. In 1963, when the Democrats stood firmly against the right of black people to participate in elections, in voting, and against the abolition of segregation in schools, restaurants, and buses, that is, the Democratic Party wanted to keep racism and segregation, while the Republicans demanded equality. And the Republicans, just like now, didn't have enough votes. Yes, they had a majority, but it wasn't enough. And that's when they used this very strategy.
Mike Lee directly refers to the Civil Rights Act of 1964 as a guide to action. He notes that when this bill reached the Senate, it was 32 votes short of ending the debate. Therefore, the Republicans kept the chamber in session for 60 days straight until they broke the opposition. And Mike Lee states that the same strategy is unfolding right now.
For 60 days, Republican senators lived in the Senate. They ate, drank, shaved, and changed clothes without leaving. If they had interrupted the session, everything would have ended. After 60 days of unrest in the country and constant demands from voters to resolve this issue, the Democrats gave in. Well then, probably some of you know, after catching the black leader in contact with a very young girl, it was, well, let's put it this way. Let's say, according to rumors, it was Martin Luther King. Well, according to rumors, absolutely just rumors, yes? So the Kennedy brothers offered him either 15 years in prison or to bring black people over to our camp. And for some reason, he chose to become a Democrat instead of going to prison. Well, and the rest, in general, we know. So the Republicans are starting the second Civil Rights Act. That is, the fight to make voting in the U.S. fair. The first was about allowing black people to vote, and the second is about preventing illegals, fraudsters, and liars from participating in those same elections. So, as I promised, I told you a very interesting story from my point of view. I hope you don't regret watching until the end. Thank you for that. Goodbye and see you next time.